incredibly versatile with 22 Grade 1 winners on every surface from 6 furlongs to 1.25 miles all over the world.
Spectacular return for Charlatan in the Run Happy Malibu Stakes.
But it's Nashville under no stress whatsoever, winning it.
Lexingtonian comes back on the inside to win it.
All purpose, all places, all power. Speightstown.
My name is Gary Falter with the Jockey Club, and I'd like to welcome each of you to today's online panel. Now, this is the 8th panel in the 2021 series of 10 online Zoom panels. And today's panel talks about a subject that every owner should know about, equine biomechanics. And keep in mind, as the panel progresses, if you have questions for the panelists, use the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And at the end of the panel, we'll answer as many of your questions as time allows. The Owner Conference Series is hosted by the Jockey Club and the Thoroughbred Owners and Breeders Association. I'd also like to recognize our sponsors, starting with the presenting sponsors, Bessemer Trust, Dean Dorton Equine, Stone Street Farm, and Stoll Keenan Ogden. I'd also like to thank today's panel sponsors, Sakatoga Stable, Silver Spring Stud, and Windstar Farm. The support of all the sponsors makes it possible to hold this event at no charge to you. And our sincere thanks to all the sponsors for their continued support of thoroughbred ownership. We hope you enjoyed today's panel, and we return next month when we have a panel that discusses breeding to win. Today's moderator is racing analyst Caton Bredar. Thank you, Caton, for being with us today, and please take it from here.
I am very happy to be joining you today. And I am going to jump right into this, but I would tell you that this is an area that I feel I could learn more about every day. Many of you may know me from TVG and may know that I have kind of banked my career on doing paddock picks and handicapping horses based on appearances. But what many might not realize is that that is a very fluid and kind of instinctual thing that is spur of the moment and very much grounded on what you see in that instant of watching horses walk into the paddock and watching them walk into the racing situation, the racing arena as such, and has absolutely nothing to do with what our panelists are going to be speaking about today. It is just kind of an overall instantaneous impression that I get. But the science of biomechanics and the types of things that the panelists are going to be discussing are fascinating to me and are a whole different avenue and world that has been really developing, I think, as far as not handicapping so much as, although it is certainly something that handicappers can use as well, but certainly for owners and breeders in terms of purchasing horses and developing, hopefully, a winning racehorse, a championship racehorse. So I'm very pleased to introduce our panelists, and I'm also very honored to be with you guys again for another one of these panels. There has been so much information that I have learned along the way, and I know today is going to be no exception. Our two panelists today are considered experts in their fields. Suzanne Smallwood is joining us. She's the president and chief analyst at Equix. Equix has been working with unmatched success in bloodstock services for over 30 years, and Suzanne has been started her career at Equix in 1986. She coordinates the equine analysis efforts at Equix, working closely with clients to select racing and breeding prospects, as well as working with clients for optimal matings for mares and stallions. She will be able to tell you a little bit more about the client list, as well as some of the success stories, and there have been many. I was just going through the website, and so many top horses along the way that we have covered over the years, but I was not aware of some of the horses that I had the privilege to cover. I know Eugene Melnick was one of the clients on the client list that I followed and enjoyed following a lot of those horses along the way several years ago. So we're very pleased to have Suzanne here, and Jeff Seder from EQB Jeff is the founder, owner, and president of Equine Biomechanics and Exercise Physiology Incorporated. And that is just one of many things on the resume that I could mention, but most pertinent to our panel today. And Jeff, it's fascinating. It's a high-tech sports medicine startup company that Jeff started in 1978, but has certainly become one of the most prominent companies of its sort in racing. And in looking at the website and the newsletters that have come out, the list is endless on the number of horses and clients that EQB has been involved with. So I look forward to hearing more about those horses and success stories as well. We're going to dive right in to let the panelists speak, because that's what we're all here for. And I do want to remind everybody as we go that there is going to be an opportunity for question and answer at the end. There is also no need to take a lot of notes because we are recording the session. So you will have opportunity to look back at it and go over it time and time again when we're through, which I think is one of the great assets of this type of format. We do miss out on the opportunity to be in person together, but I think the next best thing to being there is at least the opportunity to get to have these recordings and have them there for forever, really, to be able to look back at and to go over the information. So we're gonna dive in. I know that the heading itself is sometimes a little confusing because when you hear biomechanics, you don't even really know what it is, but more and more owners and agents that are helping owners select their horses are relying on biomechanics or on experts to help direct them in their decisions to find young horses that have the right conformation, to have the right elements to come together to be a successful racehorse. And they turn to experts in biomechanics to go through all the different things that come together to add to the structural conformation, to weed horses out on their short lists, to find horses that maybe don't have the right biomechanics, that have some imbalances. So when we dive in and when we talk about that, though, or the science of biomechanics, I think it can mean different things to different people. So probably the most important thing is to kind of have an understanding of what that means. Suzanne, let's start with you and help the audience to understand what equine biomechanics is and why it's important.
Well, from our perspective, the equine biomechanics is the study of the relationships of the bone and muscle groups of the horse and how they will work together to produce efficient motion, and really like how good a horse can be, how fast it can be. That's what everybody wants. They want a balanced horse that can run, fast and be strong over a certain distance of ground. So we started using the body measurements of the horse, where we can apply growth rates and look at age intervals from 2 years to 6 years and study all the relationships of the bone groups at these age intervals and see what the horse's stride traits are, how balanced the stride is, their power, their leverage. So it's those key areas in the horse that we try to look at based on the measurements. And biomechanics is about a third of the total picture of a horse if you're looking at pedigree and you're looking at the physiological traits, and then you have the biomechanics. So it's very important. You do your pedigree work, you have a veterinarian, and then you look at the biomechanics of the horse.
Jeff, same question for you. I'm just wondering if you have anything to add to it or a different take on the definition and why it's important. Jeff, you're still muted. If you can, there you go.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yep.
I do have a different take on it. Biomechanics is actually a discipline within engineering and bioengineering. You can go to universities and study it. People get PhDs in it. It's used in the Olympics and all kinds of places. It has a lot of things that go into it. And it is in fact measuring energy expenditures, quadruped locomotion, and injury prone stuff, the forces that are going on, we buried force plates in racetracks. We used high-speed photography with cameras in 3 different locations, above and in front and on the side. We did it on thousands of horses with scientists, PhDs from and heads of departments from University of Delaware, Biomechanics, MIT, engineering, Harvard, other University of Penn vet school and that kind of thing. It took years. One of the papers we published was 12,000 horses, real racehorses on real racetracks over 10 years, including many, many Breeders' Cup horses. And it's complex, but there's a lot of things that are really simple. I guess I would maybe bring up 2 things about it that show how complex it is. There's an awful lot of literature where they measure they measure all kinds of things about the 4-legged animal, and there's also static measurements and dynamic. Often just measuring what they stand look like isn't as important as when they're in motion. They'll fool you. They can do things. Champions come in all kinds of sizes and shapes. But anyway, what was I going to say about that? Well, for example, stride length. Some people try to make it as simple as the stride length. And I have a slide somewhere where I'm going to show you from one of our published papers where we have something like 50 horses that were major stakes winners at over a mile. They're all going the exact same velocity, and their strides are everywhere from the shortest possible to the longest possible that a horse can have at that velocity. And yet they were all basically, champions. And why would that be? It's because stride length isn't as simple as a predictor of what's going on and of the efficiency of the stride. Plus, sometimes they're accelerating, sometimes they're decelerating. The jockeys are doing things. They're different sizes, different ages, different sexes, different surfaces they're running on. And so, but you can decipher all that. You just can't do it so simply. And there was something else I was going to say about the engineering, but I'll shut up for a minute.
Well, Jeff, I just to continue it, I know many sports do use biomechanics. Obviously, they might use it differently than horse racing, but they use it to improve athletic performance. So a quarterback coach might use it to develop an all-star quarterback. Or
can I interrupt there for a second? We did
Sure.
it for the United States Olympic Committee, for the bobsled team, and for the figure skaters, and for some of the other sports, shot put, things like that. And it made a big difference. But what we learned was, we started out with people going theoretically what would be the most efficient and most powerful way to do it. And that all went right out the window. It was all wrong. And so then we just studied the champions, and then we came up with things that really helped the Olympic teams. And the same thing happened with the horses. In the literature, they were, for example, there's all kinds of biomechanics literature on the energetics of quadruped locomotion. And there's equations and measurements and leverage and thrust. And we took all of that, and we spent years and millions of dollars with getting enormous amounts of racehorse data and trying to see if it could separate it out. And it didn't work. Well, it didn't work because it was developed to tell the difference between a lizard and a turtle and an elephant and a gazelle, not between a decent or average racehorse and an elite racehorse. What did work was when we had to go and take measurements using the high-speed film from all kinds of directions and digitize it, 500 pictures a second, and then analyze it with all the people who got involved. And we just said, what's different about the great racehorses? And even then it didn't work until we broke it down till we had large sets of data by age, sex, size, height, weight, all that kind of stuff. So it's that, I don't know. When I think of biomechanics, I think of all those years and all that data and boiling it down. But when we started, it was like they had theories about the spherical chicken, but chickens aren't spherical, and so it had to be all redone again for what it really is out there. I don't know. I'm beating a dead horse there.
So, but Suzanne, to pick up on what Jeff was talking about in terms of the application of it, or however it has to be adapted. I'm just
Right.
curious if you guys do use biomechanics in some form, but is it something that's widely used in horse racing today?
More and more. We've been in business a long time, and as far as what we do, say at the yearling sale, which is to take measurements of the yearlings and study it all and look at all that. I mean, our strike rate is still over 30% stakes winners identified this way. So more and more people use it. Some people still use, cardios alone. A lot of people use the stride analysis at the 2-year-old sales, and they do look at stride lengths, but Jeff's correct in that it's so multifaceted. You can't look at just one thing, but you can start with one thing and then keep building on and keep looking at the way the horse is moving and the thrust, timing. There's so many things. I think that's what it's nothing's real simple about it, but you're pulling so many pieces of data together to make a decision. And that's the same way with the static measurements that we use, on a horse, whether it be for yearling selection, measuring 2-year-olds, even breedings. You still have the ability to look in at the horse, whereas like you looking at horses in the paddock, I mean, you have a very good eye for that. That's what everybody's doing at the sale. You're trying to look for the balances, and there's things that you see in a horse that you feel about a horse. Your agent has that kind of capability, but we're taking it a step further by actually looking beyond the wrapper of the horse, and you're actually looking at the bone groups and how these are going to grow and how they're going to develop. And we have the capability to do that, to help our clients fine tune things.
I think you're leading into my next question, or almost have answered it in a sense, but I'm just wondering how often you're faced with a situation where you have horses, say, with good pedigrees, or that you've gone through and they've become horses that you're really zeroing in on, that have the good pedigrees, but they go through the sale, and then you're identifying them as far as the way they're structured, that it's unlikely they're going to be successful as racehorses.
Right. Unfortunately, you can get, good balances and not so good balances in all different pedigree combinations. And mainly that's because the statistical distances between the sire and the dam are pretty small. So you can, even slight differences between the two parents can produce a less than ideal offspring. And it may not be that apparent to the naked eye. A stride can be off, if it's off by a half an inch, it's going to be a less efficient stride balance. Or if the center of gravity is in a certain position, or if the cannon's not quite in the proper relationship to the hock and the tibia. There's so many little things in there. The body weight's too light. That can be a problem. So yeah, we do see inefficiencies in the better pedigrees, and both parents may have been just elite racehorses, but it just might not have been the right combination phenotypically to blend those two together, and introduced a little bit too much variation.
I just add on to that. If you look at the top sires and the top dams and the top most expensive horses, and that more than 90% of them don't turn out to be very successful. So that pretty much tells it all. If that's your only criteria for selection, you're not going to do very well. So there's clearly other things that are going on. By the way, all this research that I'm referring to, a lot of it is available free for download from our website. So you don't have to take my word for the size of the databases or who was involved or how the methodology was done or that kind of thing. And also, our track record, we publish that on the website too, and I may have a slide on it. We don't use stakes races. We use graded stakes races. And I think that's an important difference. I just want to point that out. The graded stakes, there's 500 races at graded stakes in the world, 100 grade ones, that's it. They're like the World Championships and the Kentucky Derby. And there's, they're much, much harder to succeed at than ordinary stakes races. And I'm tooting our own horn, but it was a long road to get here. But our record is not in stakes races, but in graded stakes. And one other thing. Well, no, that's enough for now. Didn't we have a video we were going to show?
We're going to get to it, I promise. I do want to ask about, though, Jeff, to pick up on what you just said about horses that, kind of eschewing the top pedigrees and looking beyond that. But I'm wondering how often you're seeing horses that have the modest pedigrees, that have the other good attributes as far as the biomechanics, the way they're moving, the other attributes that you're looking at that go on to be successful racehorses.
Often we've had 21 grade 1 winners. We bought for 20,000, 10,000. I'm trying to find my slide on that. I managed to lose it. But we got a lot of, if you go to our website under the track record thing, you'll see there's an awful lot of graded stakes horses there. We bought as yearling or 2-year-olds under 100,000, under 200,000. They were modest pedigrees at best, at very best. And sometimes they didn't have traditional conformation either, but they had what it takes to be an athlete. And they succeed all the time. We see people spend $1 million plus on a horse, and there's something so wrong with it that there's just no way it's going to succeed. If you look at it in super slow motion, it does something that makes it clearly it's not going to stand training, or it has a small heart and lungs and spleen way below average. It's such a disadvantage, and it's so easy and inexpensive to find that, and yet the people don't pay attention. It amazes me.
This is the last question before we do get into the slides and the video that Jeff mentioned. So I think it's important to give our guests that are joining us a little bit more information about the things, the data, the other aspects of information that you all are using, how much data is used in forming a basis in evaluating biomechanics, why that's so important. I mean, you've touched on it. Each of you have mentioned a couple things, stride analysis. Jeff, you've mentioned the things that you're not looking at, but if you could just give just a few of the specific pieces of data or different things that you're going to look at, and then we will get into the slides where I think people can kind of get a more tangible aspect of it.
First of all, we don't throw out the baby with the bath. There's 300 years of knowledge accumulated in the horse racing industry by the experts, by the real horsemen. And but we don't disregard that. We build on top of that. So we're looking for a subset of what the traditional horseman does pick, not something they wouldn't pick. That's number one. Number two is they do things like they go back they knock back at the knee when they stand there in their conformation. But when they run, they go so far back at the knee, we call it a banana leg. It's hard to watch, and they do it every stride. And when we bury force plates under the track and we put transducers in there, horseshoes and things, there can be 4 tons on the average on those little thin legs, and that hoof no bigger than your open hand. 4 tons, and it's going 40 miles an hour or faster. And if the knee is all, the knee is so far back, that's one. Some of them throw. You can't. The horseman will say, "Oh, I can see that." In our video, you'll see a regular video, and then you'll see it super slow motion. And you won't see it in the regular video, some of the stuff, but you will see it in super slow motion. Also, some of them, when they bring, for example, just to start, when they bring their foreleg forward, their hoof will be flapping, or it'll be swirling like a swizzle stick. So when they put it down, you have no idea what angle it's at. And they get chips in their sesamoids in their knees and this, and they say, "Oh, it was a bad step." It wasn't a bad step. It was a bad stride. And they do it every time. Some of them are really hard to watch in super slow motion because the hooves are swirling, and then they're going back at the knee, and the legs are going sideways. And it's just, and they're going fast, at some of these 2-year-old sales. So it's very hard to see some of these things. What else can I don't know. Some of them look great, but the stride is very short. no matter what they do, they're doing everything right and they don't get what they want out of it. We have what we call the slow secretariat model. For a while in our early days, we would pick horses that ran exactly like Secretariat. You could overlay them over Secretariat, the stride would be the same. And we found out that that didn't work. And it didn't work because some of them put in what Secretariat put in, but they don't get out what he got out for whatever reason, for the muscles or the heart or the this or that. Other reason was some of them were doing exactly what he did, but they were doing it at 12 seconds a furlong, and he was doing it at 11. And it wasn't the same. It was a different deal. So I don't know. There's a couple of specifics.
Okay, Suzanne, just a little bit of a talk about the data that's used in forming a basis for evaluating the biomechanics and what's important for you.
Well, since we do a lot of work, like I said, with the static measurements and the 2-year-old breed show data to talking about what we can get from the static measurements, there are, I mean, certainly, like Jeff was saying, the stride balance is very important because otherwise you are causing undue forces on the front end. If the stride is tipped too far forward, they're going to be harder on themselves. So you got that. But then if you don't have the proper measurements with the power and the thrust, then you just have a slow horse. They can't be tactical enough. And then if the body weight isn't quite right, the horse draws upon its body weight for energy. So you need that. So everything's probably, I would say the stride balance is very key on that, but everything else has to play into it. I mean, it's an organism. Everything has to work together.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're going to start with Jeff and then go back to Suzanne with some of her slides. But right now,
can I say one more thing about the data, just to emphasize it? You'll see in the studies you can download at our website. Typically, there are 10,000 horses followed over 10 years through the end of the 3-year-old year. So that's the kind of data amounts we think. In the appendices and in the studies, it explains why we thought that. But in a nutshell, it's because they're all going different speeds and they're different ages and they're different sexes and they're different sizes. And it's apples and oranges. And when you lump it all together, it doesn't prove anything. When you separate it all out, patterns appear. That's it.
We've got your slides or video, and then we'll circle back with some comments after.
This video demonstrates the value of slow motion films at 2-year-old in training auctions of thoroughbred racehorses. The 5 horses shown were all bought at the same auction by a well-respected, experienced horseman who buys millions of dollars of young racehorses every year, including the most expensive horse at this select, well-known auction in 2001. This Glitterman colt sold for $72,000. His left front leg curled more than average, at times appearing to hit his elbow. Once a horse attains racing speeds and has that momentum, the motion of the limbs consumes the most energy. Inefficiency in this area is worth noting. Extraneous limb motion can also have soundness consequences. This explosive red colt sold for $15,000. His front legs winged out in a looping pattern that was clearly evident on the slow-motion films, especially after he changed leads. These kinds of inefficiencies at racing speeds are often unpredictable from the conformation and the walk you'll see back at the barn, which may seem perfect. This Thunder Gulch colt sold for $270,000 and was the sale topper. He had good action. There was some extraneous motion in his left front leg.
All right, let me just say something quick about it. That was from 20 years ago, so you'll see that the times are slower and the prices are a lot lower than they are now, but the horses are pretty much the same. And also, you know, I'm obviously passionate about all this. I talk too fast, I get excited, but I love it. That's why. I love the horses. I live on a farm.
I know you had some slides as well. I'm not sure if we'll get those in or not, but I will ask about those. And in the meantime,
This is the one, when you want to take a screenshot or this thing's being recorded, this is the slide for all these horses that won major stakes going over a mile. They're all going exactly the same velocity. And there's the data on the stride lengths, which go everywhere from teeny weeny to very long. And so one would have to ask why. And this was really done carefully with the 3 cameras, biomechanists, PhDs, and a whole crew of people who were trying very hard.
so this is information you would use or would not use?
No, we use it, but we use
Okay.
it in context. You got to look at the stride. You can't just look at the length. And then this is just our track record. It's at our website. It's in the recording. You know, I don't know how many other, we've had 21 grade 1 winners, different horses, 10 of them purchased under 100,000 at 20, 43 greatest. This is only in the last several years. And we bought them at an average of under $158,000. So we're doing something right. But what we're doing right, I think, is we start with really good horsemen, and then we put an overlay of technology on that. This is what I call the banana leg. This is what in slow motion, there's back at the knee. This horse is actually going about 10 and 2 or something. You know, if your leg looked like that, it was 4 tons on it, it would hurt. And that's what you're looking at. And it's not unusual, but I defy you to try and see that without slow motion film. This is just a kind of grip. This is where the data goes from the previous picture. Here we're the stick figures. We take spots all over the horse, and then as he goes along, you see where each piece of the horse is going. What's velocity. This is a graph of the hoof, the fetlock, the lower leg, and the upper leg. at the velocity of a horse breezing. It was named Eddie's Out. It was actually my first racehorse. Now, this is on how much data. Another reason, why do we need so much data? What percentage of horses are grade 1 winners? Full from the, you can see it's like 0.2%, 0.2%, maybe 5 times that from the very best pedigrees, but it's still almost nothing. So if you're looking for 0.2% of the breed, and you're going to, how big a database so that you have a lot of those from all different, that you've gotten from all different ages, sizes, sexes, speeds, you need an enormous amount of data that it'll boil down to maybe 5 or 6 or 10 really wonderful horses. If you got 3 or 4 wonderful horses from each of the categories that you were measuring, you had to start with an enormous number. And this is the same thing. It starts with 7,300 horses measurements. Then it starts dividing them up: colts and fillies, North American and foreign. And then it goes to, let's see, wait, hold on a second. Let me see if I can see this. And then it goes to their ages, 12 to 14, 15 to 17, 15 to 28 months. Then it comes down race records available through the end of the 3-year year, and those who aren't. Then it goes down to earn less than 2,000 or greater than 10,000 per start. And then it comes down to turf versus dirt. And then it goes down to sprint, middle, and route. By the time you get to the bottom, starting with 7,334 horses, you're down to like 20 horses in each category. If you didn't start with that big number at the top, you're not going to have a decent number at the bottom to say anything about. That's it, I guess.
No, it does reinforce the idea of the wide net. If you don't start with that wide net, there's no way you're ever going to get down to the smaller group. Which it's interesting because it's certainly different ways to say it. But Suzanne, I think when you were speaking of all the different things that you are looking at as well, it strikes me that it's very much saying the same thing, maybe saying it a little bit differently. But I know we want to get to your slides as well. I want to remind everybody to reiterate what Jeff just said too, that for the audience, there is going to be opportunity at the very end to ask some questions of both Jeff and Suzanne. So we will have time for that. And also this is being recorded, so everybody will have opportunity to go back and take a closer look at the slides, the videos, which certainly give a really good view of the stride analysis that Jeff was speaking of. And you sure see a lot more with that slow motion, that is for sure. Suzanne, I know you have some slides as well.
Okay, this is a sort of a basic diagram showing the areas that we take physical body measurements of the horses. And this is what we can apply on a yearling and try to project the motion and the power and the stride balance and center of gravity of the horse. And we've been very, very successful using this technology on the younger horses. We take about 38 measurements, and the measurements are then, we apply the growth rates of thoroughbreds to the measurements, and we're able to, again, I mentioned earlier, we grow these horses out to maturity, and we look at all the relationships of all these bone and muscle groups at age intervals, which reflect their racing years. And then from that, we're able to look at their stride balance, efficiency, power, thrust, extension, things like that. This is a 17-dimensional model that we use, and there is not one ideal horse. This isn't a 2D representation here. We have volume in the model. So we don't have one ideal. We have dozens and dozens of ideal relationships. So each horse that we measure and their data is put into our program, that horse is graded against the ideal it most closely resembles, because it wouldn't be fair to be measuring distance horses and graded against the top sprinter mechanics. They can be very, very different. So this shows you, we're looking at body length, the size of the hip, the ilium, the femur, and the tibia, those relationships. That has a lot to do with how The distance the horse runs is the length of the tibia, the length of the cannon and legs dictate the stride length. There's a lot of things up in the shoulder area, the humerus and the radius and the relationships up there, which cause they're either efficient in front or they're going to have high action in front. And that's wasted motion and it's fatiguing. So anyway, we take 38 measurements here. And then if we can go to the next slide, please. This sort of just points out some of the things that we would be looking at. So we have the stride balance, which is the key to efficiency and performance. The stride length we can determine based on the measurements of the bone group and also the power. Also helps us determine the racing surfaces. We talked about efficiency. Especially with the front end, if their action is going to be too high or if they're going to be a little smoother in front. Power, there's a whole lot that goes on. Obviously, all the power comes through the hind end, and that all has to be in really good proportions for optimum thrust, to be tactical, to have maneuverability, or otherwise you just have a horse that's just going along. We're able to give you an idea of the horse's distance potentials, whether the horse is going to be a sprinter miler, he has, two-turn potential, running style. Again, we glean a lot of things from these relationships. Again, if they're going to be off the pace, if they're going to be able to get out of the gate fast based on the ratios, again, in the hind end. And the other thing we talked about is phenotype. These are a dozen physical type classifications that are based on the relationship of the power and the stride to the body weight. And then the other thing we add in is the cardio scores. And that is we do ultrasounds of the heart. And we look at the stroke volume, how much blood they're pumping at rest. And that all ties into the horse and his ultimate size. Everything is done, different models for each sex. We have everything's calculated to the exact age of the horse. Yeah, you can go on to the next slide if you want. And once we get all the data, it's expressed into a report. And this is just the first page of report that we had picked out for a client, and he ended up being a champion. This was maybe 2 or 3 years ago. And once we get all the data pulled together, we give the client what's called biomechanical efficiency score. So you can see here, it's also, there's things on my website too, that a horse with the high 98s have very good overall efficiency and balance. This horse is a phenotype E1, which is a very good phenotype. And it talks about the distance capability. We have a thing we call K factor, and that has to do with a high rate of speed at longer distances. There are a number of traits that combine to give us this K factor, how we rate the horse. And then there's a box here about the cardio efficiency. This horse had a much larger than average heart, very good walls. His pace was naturally slow, very good spleen volume as a yearling, and then how we grade the heart. We're going to go to the next slide, please. I do provide a written report based on all the data and all the relationships as far as the stride and the extension and the power. But we also give the client kind of a graphic representation of the horse based on the horse's measurements. So this shows how the mechanics and the geometry will develop. It shows from 24 to, and we go to 60 months because that's 5 years of age, and most horses are kind of done by then anyway. It shows the stride balance. It shows the body set. The body set is very important to the overall stride picture of the horse. If the horse is too low chested in front and their center of gravity is forward, they're going to be harder on their front end. If they're too high, they may just have a higher trajectory once they're launching off the hind end. So you want kind of things to be ideal, and there's different relationships for turf horses and sprinters and distance horses. Again, you're really kind of combining everything to create a picture. This represents the horse's power. This horse has excellent power all the way through. The back triangles were the ilium, the femur, and the tibia, which shows good balance there. Sprinters sometimes have a shorter tibia because it gives them optimum thrust. Distance horses sometimes have a slightly longer tibia. They get more stride length from that as well. And then it just shows where the gaskin is and just sort of a number of things. Hock power, the ratio of that. And it just sort of helps our clients kind of get a really good picture of what the horse is going to grow into. And then you can go on to the next slide. This carries on a little bit to the front end of the horse, where it shows where the humerus and the cannon ratio is. And you want that to be in a proper proportion. This horse, based on his measurements, I know it seems broad, but this horse could probably go anywhere from 6 to 10 furlongs. And he could run 10 furlongs because he wanted that and became a champion. The next slide is just so you can see what ultrasound is. This is a cross section of the left ventricle, which is the output valve. And this is what we take picture of. And we do measurements on the chamber of the expanded state, which is the diastolic, and then the systolic state, which is contracted down. And once we get the data, we put the numbers in with the horse's body measurements. So we're actually adjusting it for how big that particular horse is going to be. And we put in the exact age, obviously whether it's a colt or a filly. And we just see if the heart is going to suit the horse's structure. And we also do measurements on the spleen volume as well. And sorry, I'm just sitting here looking at what I've got here. We also do a lot of standalone hearts, and we still take a series of measurements to correlate everything with the horse's size when we do the standalone heart capacities. Again, it's another piece of information for clients to use when they're buying horses. And these are all standalone products that we offer in addition to regular selection services. I touched briefly on the phenotypes of the thoroughbred based on the body measurements. And this horse is the same horse from the report. And this is shows the balance of body weight to power and stride. The type 1s are kind of the most balanced of all horses. They have an ideal balance of the power and the body weight and the stride. They're fairly rare in the breed. The most common ones in the breed tend to be the E1 and the E, and E means even, but they're also a little bit lighter in trunk size. The S types are horses that tend to run on their stride rhythm, with 2S having a little more power and weight than, say, the S1s and the S2s. The S3s will be, a lot of them can be just real, very long distance horses. The power types are the 2P, the P1, and the Ps. It'd be sprinters. And there's, like I said, there's good and bad in all phenotypes, but it's a good guide, to some distancing on these. And it's a very good guide to breeding consistency. So we look at this carefully. We have a whole other program on matings and using the measurements and stallion measurements to produce matings. And this is very interesting with that. The W's have too much body weight. There's not too many of those. This is always of interest to some of our new clients when I show them this. These are some examples of phenotypes. And these are all stallions that are no longer alive or active. And you see here that the type 1s, they tend to be a lot of our breed shapers. You've got Seattle Slew in here. You've got Nijinsky. You've got Northern Dancer. These are all type 1 horses. There it is. Blushing Groom was a type 1. Mr. Prospector was a type 1. 2S's examples were affirmed. So they run on their stride rhythm a lot. I've got Deputy Minister, Exclusive Native is in here. Chris S. Unbridled was a 2S. You can go to the next slide, please. And then this is S1. Alidar is here, as is Capote, and Secretariat was an S1, runs on stride rhythm. As powerful as he was, he had a little bit more on his very nice long stride as well. And then so forth. S2s are even further out. You got Pleasant Colony, actually Unbridled Song was an S2. S3 Riva Ridge, if anybody remembers. I don't know if you're new in the business, you might not remember Riva Ridge, but he's there. And then there's not many of the type W's. The 2P, they can run at really any distance, but they have a little more power. We've got AP Indian there. We've got Danzig, Scat Daddy, who passed too soon, is in there. And then so we have some sprinter types like Carson City, but then you've got AP Indian there too, a little bit more power. P1s and Ps, so you get more and more power in those. P types sometimes don't even stay sound. They have so much power that they can almost get hurt. But these are kind of rare. You can go to the next slide, please. This kind of jumps us over to our Pro Stride product, which we do at the 2-year-old sales. And we've been analyzing stride data since about 1989 as well. And our technology has evolved over the years. And right now we take our own film as well, and we shoot at about 180 frames per second. So our videos are crystal clear. And I'm just showing you some still shots here because our video files are kind of massive. But one of the things that we do offer, we do calculate stride length. We have a way of getting our own videos, and we have a format where we actually calculate the average stride length for each horse in a 2-year-old sale. And so we do that, and we offer that as a product, and with a number of other things and some quartile rankings. So a client will know what are the longest strides, how fast they went, and is it in the top 25%, the next 25%, or is it in the lower quartiles for that particular breeze show day. Then the next thing we do, we also post our videos on our own site, so they're free to look at. And this is where everybody has to do their homework, including myself. And like Jeff was showing in his videos, horses can be doing some very strange things with their legs, and you really can't see it in real time, especially now we're on synthetic surfaces. The horses breeze very quickly, and it's a lot to do. The horse we're looking at now is actually Matoli. He's champion sprinter. That was his very good timing for a sprinter. He went 10 flat. He's not on the right lead, but he was very efficient. This is him sort of launching. And what's good about him is he's launching well off the hind leg, but he's launching forward evenly. And he's not too high in front. And he's got good thrust off the hock. And if you want to go to the next one. And for this distance and as fast as he is, he's got very good body use. He's able to pull his body together, and then he'll be able to stretch out like he was in the original, the very first picture that I showed. So this is important for an 1/8 of a mile. And this is his front leg landing. He's, for as fast as he went, he's landing very well on the front, on that knee. But we're pointing out, the pasterns are the shock absorbers to the front legs. So they're supposed to bend, they're supposed to bend and allow the forces of the leg to hit properly. So for as fast as he's going, a lot of horses will show a little back of the knees, and he's just slightly, but he's actually very, very good. Now we're going to look at another horse who just ended up being kind of average. His timing, he's actually off the ground, which isn't necessarily bad, especially on synthetic, but it just shows you a little bit more timing. He's got a little bit airborne. He's reaching out okay. He's just a hair high in front. And then if you go to the next frame, on his launch, he's got his leg a little bit back, so he's actually launching uphill. He's not going as forward as Metoli was. And then he's got a little bit higher knee action there. And then in the same point where he's supposed to be all pulled together, and he did breeze a little bit slower than Metoli did, but he's not really able to use his body that well. He's not pulled together, and he's got a little bit of wasted motion, like that front foot up pretty close to the elbow, which that ends up just being, like I said, wasted motion. It's not that efficient. And then his landing wasn't so great. He's much more back at the knee landing, especially, I think this horse went in 10 and 2, and that's pretty torque backwards, which Jeff showed in another video. So this horse was kind of a pretty average mover. And with the advent of the synthetic surfaces at OBS, everybody really had to kind of shift gears on how we were to interpret looking at slow motion and how these horses, because so many of them are running them on dirt. So what are they doing now on synthetic? That's going to transfer to dirt. The synthetic can actually hide an awful lot of inefficiencies, and horses that aren't very strong can sometimes get over that track very, very easily. So you still have to use your horsemanship when you go look at the horses in the barns. But it's been an interesting education over the last, I don't know, 10 or 11, 12 years since they put that synthetic in, because the stride lengths are different. A lot of things are different. Again, there's a lot of differences between how a horse going an 1/8 will move versus a 1/4, and then certainly the few that'll go 3/8. Those are all different ways of moving. And I spend hours and hours with the slow motion work at night once we get the stride lengths lined up, and just looking for, there's just so many little idiosyncrasies you're looking for and the positive traits. And some horses look like they're just going down the track and they're not doing anything special, and then you slow them down and they're doing something very special and they're using themselves very well. And that's when it gets kind of exciting, when you can find those that look like they could be, really good and efficient. And it's, like I said, it's a number of things. But what we really are excited about, because we do the measurements at the yearling age, and I'm telling you, I'm as excited about this as anything, but you're still learning all the time with the biomechanics. What I learned from the 2-year-old sales, we're able to apply at the yearling level, what we're measuring from yearlings, and then we see how they move at the 2-year-old sale. And then we see how they race, and we track everything. Every day we do massive studies off the yearling data and the yearling hearts. We do massive studies off our 2-year-old data and the cardio data, and we keep track of all that. Just always looking for what else we can concentrate on and look to find the better horses. And more people will make mistakes at the yearling sales because there's less, they're not out there galloping along. You're extrapolating what they're going to do.
Suzanne, I don't mean to cut you off because it is fascinating to me, and it heartens me because that you say you're learning, because there seems so much that we are learning today through all of this. The questions are filing in, and the time has flown by with so much great information. We're going to pause for a second and try to jump into those questions so that we give everybody a chance. We're already through our hour, but we're going to just get a short message from Blood Horse, and then we're going to jump into our question and answers. But thank you both so much for all of this great information. And I think a little bit more to come once we get to those questions. I think we've had a record number of questions already that have come through the queue that Gary's been sorting through. So we will be right back after this word from Blood Horse.
Blood Horse Plus, available through bloodhorse.com, provides exclusive, timely, and unmatched content to subscribers, including Fox Sports, Blood Horse branded weekly programs, a detailed stakes winners section, behind-the-scenes videos from Blood Horse staff, on-demand access to deeper horse statistics, and a $5 monthly credit to equineline.com. Upgrade to Blood Horse Plus today.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. Thanks, Suzanne, Caton. I've got a bunch of questions from the audience, so let's get started. So here's a question. Maybe, Suzanne, you can take this one. Can measurements be made on weanlings to determine growth rates like you would do with a yearling?
They're pretty young. We've tried, but their growth rates are not very reliable. They're kind of all over the place.
Okay.
They're just too erratic.
Okay.
14 months is the youngest that we measure.
Okay. Good direct answer. All right, here's a question for Jeff. Hey, Jeff, on the film, what was the analysis for the last horse in the film? The person that asked this question, I like that one best. I think that was the Thunder Gulch colt.
He was the, I don't remember. Was that,
Yeah.
There was one that was hitting his elbow and going back at the knee. There was one that was throwing its legs all over the place. And then there was, I think it was the Thunder Gulch was the one that we went for like 200 grand or something. It was
Right.
pretty good. He just, the forelegs were, it was wasted motion, a higher action. The forelegs, there wasn't a lot of thrust off the hind end. It was, you know, it was a sail topper, and it went one of the fastest horses at that sale. We didn't love it. Monarchos was at that sale. And that was the one we loved. Smooth, even, and a whole lot different. He was actually in that video, but we didn't get to it. So yeah, I guess the short answer would be we thought it was pretty good. We wouldn't have bought it.
But if somebody wanted to see the rest of the videos, they're on your website, right?
It's all on our website. It's all
Right.
free.
Okay.
You can download the research, the data, the research, the studies behind what we say we're doing and how we're doing it. And too bad we didn't publish all the studies we did that proved nothing, so we could debunk other methods, but we didn't. So.
Okay, here's a question. Are there biomechanics data that differentiates turf and dirt runners? Maybe Suzanne, you want to start with that?
There are relationships that we tend to see more often in turf horses than we do in dirt horses. Turf kind of helps with thrust. So sometimes if a horse is a little lighter in his hip or gaskin, things like that, they may have better luck racing on the grass. Especially a colt, you have to have an awful lot of power and strength to go on dirt, going not only short distances, but long distances. So,
okay.
Yeah, there's definitely key things that I will see when analyzing a horse. I said, this probably isn't going to be better on dirt. It's going to need to go on grass to be its best.
Can I put in a word or two there?
Yeah, go ahead.
The grass is a surface is steady, and you know, we call it dirt, but it's really a beach. You know, there's 4 inches or so of sand there, or sand like loam or whatever. But so they really are very different. The hoof gets immediate, steady support on the grass, and on the dirt it does not. And so each of them has their own timing of each piece of their stride. So to the extent that there's going to be a period of time when the hoof is on the ground pushing, they can take advantage of it on the turf in ways they can't do it on the dirt. And like she says, if you're going to run through on the beach, anybody who's tried running on a beach, it takes a lot more energy. You got to be stronger and fitter.
Okay. So in young horses, and then as 2-year-olds, you can see the front hooves getting past or hitting high up on the rear hind leg. However, in most races, you don't see it. Do they grow out of this, and do they train out of this?
Well, they're not going to be racing at the speeds of a breeze show. Is that what they're asking? There's more interference in at a 2-year-old breeze?
Well, I think they're just saying in young horses and in 2-year-olds, there's certain action that may not be desirable. Do they grow out of that or train out of it?
Not always. Some things could be speed related. You have to figure that out. But if a horse is pretty inefficient, I don't know. I don't really see him being any better. A lot of the lower leg bones are done growing by the time they're at a 2-year-old cell. They'll get more body length, obviously body weight. They'll get more upper body growth. But the legs are about done. Okay. I would always look for the most efficient horse you can find and not hope something changes.
Here's a question. Do some stallions actually stamp their offspring biomechanically, as you will hear stated, some more than others?
Stallions are more influential on patterns. So that's where you're getting the look of the look of the offspring. Mares are actually a little bit more influential in size. You do see patterns of good balance. It really depends how they sort of match up physically with the brood mares that they're bred to. But going back to our original thing, there can be imbalances in poorly constructed good pedigrees as well. I do see the patterns sometimes in the hearts. That I remember years ago, I hardly ever saw a below. I don't think I ever found a below average heart on a son in Nureyev or a daughter in Nureyev. Some of those just were always really, really, really good.
Okay. Here's a question about how many horses do you analyze at the 2-year-old sales? And is it for public view, or are you hired by buyers to make these evaluations?
Well, we analyze every horse that breezes, and I post our videos for free so anybody can get on there and watch in slow motion. In fact, if you go to equixprostride.com, that's my 2-year-old site, and actually I have a stakes gallery of horses that have won stakes in the last year or two. You can actually go and watch how they move in slow motion on that. So we analyze all that. I do slow motion work on probably 3/4 of the horses, just because I like to go as far down as I can and look at that. So when I'm doing looking, and then from then I do different products for people. People want a more detailed motion analysis. They order that from me, do a lot of hearts. We'll still do some full body measurements on horses. It's just, we sell a lot of products at the 2-year-old sale, but we analyze everything that breeds.
Okay. Jeff?
What's the question about yearling sales or 2-year-old sales?
Well, I'm going to throw yearlings in there too after you at the various sales, 2-year-olds and yearling sales.
For us, we do every horse at the sales. We have teams of people. It costs time and money, but we are taking an initial look at everything. And if it's got something that throws it out, one of the variables, then it's out. We don't do every analysis on every horse, but we'll keep going on the horses that keep passing. But it's all of them. And we do the hearts. We don't do the hearts on all the horses, but we'll do maybe 50 to 75 a night cardio. So we'll have hundreds of horses at each sale.
Yeah. We
By
do
the
the
way,
same.
we invented the heart stuff, and we
60,
the
70 a
equipment
day.
that does it as well. And it's the papers are on that or on our site. We even designed it. Yeah, we did the equipment. We have a patent on it, but we don't enforce it.
Okay. Here's an interesting question. Can you think of any outlier stories where you've shaken your head when a horse has done surprisingly well or surprisingly poor? As it relates to biomechanics.
Toothlessburg. There are some horses that'll just, I don't know what it is, but we don't know everything. And we're working on probabilities. For that's like pedigree is the probability of what you're going to get. But we go for the athlete. Sometimes you'll throw snake eyes 3 times. It happens. Sometimes we go out there and there's a blank page in the catalog and it's a serious athlete. And then or sometimes like Toothlessburg, you go out there and you look at the way the horse moves and you'll say, oh my God. And then it's a champion. And you'll say, I don't know how the hell he did it without destroying himself. But he did. Good for him. No, we don't understand it all. And it's all about probabilities, not certainty.
Right.
Okay.
And we're wrong most of the time. Nobody gets more than half the horses right.
Not all the good ones work out, but one of my longest clients, Bill Clifton, goes, I know all the good ones won't work out. Something won't work out. Something will happen, but just keep me from buying a bad one. He was big into the negative selection. Just get the bad ones off the short list for me.
Okay, it's about 3:15. Let's do a couple more questions. So what factor does height play in biomechanics analysis?
Oh, it's a big part of it. Yeah, the height. Horses don't have to be big to be good. That's for sure. It plays in with the extension. You're looking at the height to body length ratio versus the leg length. It's very, very, very important. One of my clients bred a lovely Freud horse. We helped him with the matings, and he was small. And I said, and he wanted to sell him. And I'm like, well, I don't know if you're gonna get much for him, but he's very balanced. He was like 98 sixes. I think you need to keep him. He RNA'd for nothing at the New York Bred Sale. Well, he's made about $800,000. His name is Therapist, and he wasn't very big, but he's a turf horse. I said, he's gonna be grass. It won't matter how big he is. And he's been, he's part of their family now.
If I can jump in there real quick, on our website, you can download the study on the cardios. It's on the right-hand side, and it's something like 10,000 horses or 12,000 horses over 10 years. It has the height of them all, and then what happened, and their graphs that relate and statistics on the height of the horse at different ages and how it relates to their performance later. And it's such a powerful predictor by itself that if you were going to do absolutely nothing else, if you could do one thing at a sale, you pick the biggest horses, you'll do better than average.
Okay, last question. And again, thank you so much, Jeff and Suzanne. I'm going to jump off here after this question. Before buying into a horse, can one request that the biomechanical efficiency scores, heart and lung size, leg motion, images, etc., be provided? May take some mystery out of the business and offend certain groups, may not. So somebody's asking, before you buy into a horse, is that a reasonable request to ask for the biomechanical data?
I do that all the time for people. The yearlings, they order reports all the time.
No, I think he means should the seller have to provide it? Then somebody has to pay for it. It costs money to do it.
Yeah, I don't know.
I can think it would in the future sometime that would be wonderful if it could be all automated with artificial intelligence, and you could have it out there. It would democratize things, and it would be better for the horses. There'd be fewer injuries, and more people would participate because they wouldn't get wiped out. I think it would be terrific, but I can't see it happening. Also there's whole different approaches. Suzanne's approach is really very different than ours. They're based on very different science, very different approach to the mechanics and the engineering. And I think you just have to decide, you look into the research behind each of it in detail and decide what you like.
All of it's they're all good tools.
The one thing I've realized over the course of these panels, and also just in all the years of being in the game, is how many different ways there are to skin a cat. And I'm always fascinated by hearing the many different panelists that have very different ways of doing the same thing and have great success. But it is true, there can be a lot of different ways that are equally successful. So I really want to thank both of you. And one last time, I think we've had it someplace in the course of the conversation, but could you guys just speak what your website is for anybody who's listening in, if they want to go back to your website?
Well, EQUIX is equixbio.com. That's my main site that talks about all the products that we offer and our successes. And then our 2-year-old site is equixprostride.com. And that's
Jeff,
where we have the 2-year-old data.
And your website?
We're just 3 letters, eqb.com for equine biometrics, eqb.com.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Suzanne Smallwood, Jeff Seder, for your time, your insight. Also, thanks to Gary Falter, Shannon Luce from the Jockey Club as well. Our sponsors, Blood Horse, Windstar Farm, especially a big thank you, Airdrie Farm, Silver Springs Stud, but most of all, many thanks to everyone who is joining us, taking the time from their busy schedules to be with us today. Hopefully, you all feel like you have learned something, and we'll come back again next month. We are going to be talking about breeding to win. Until then, be safe, happy. Hopefully you are visiting the Winner's Circle, and we look forward to joining you again. Many, many thanks for your time, and we look forward to seeing you again. Take care, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, Caton.
Thank you.